This is Wycombe Sound.
Hello. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. This is the weekly show where we chat about local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Ilk Shed to get our weekly album review from Twangland Jack Ford. We also head over to the Rhylight Zone for a piece of poetry or fiction, etc. Some sort of creative reading. A little bit of local events news, a little bit of local music, indie, unsigned, all that kind of stuff. It's a fun old time, so thank you for joining us. As always, you can contact me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for The Art Show on Wycombe Sound, and we're also available on Catch Up through iTunes and Spotify, all of the usual sort of podcasty services. We're on Catch Up there, and we're repeated here on Wycombe Sound on Monday nights. So, this week we are going to be chatting to Carl Snook, who is an author, a wrestler, an artist, a musician, bit of a renaissance man really. You might know him as the pirate captain from EWA, you might know him as the author of Akio and the Dream World. You might know him for his music, you might know him for his art, who knows? So we're going to chat to Carl in a little bit, but first off we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone, and we're going to crack on with the latest part of Amorphophallus Titanium, which is written by myself, Dane Cobain, narrated by Susie Q. DeMarco, and as I say, you can catch up to previous episodes if you want to hear the story from the beginning, or just dive on in. Alright.
In 1925, when Enrique was 19 years old, the Circo de la Flor performed for the final time to a relatively small crowd of just 100 or so on a village green. Its fortunes had been fading for years, ever since the outbreak of the war and the grand separation in which half of the entertainers left for pastures new. By the time that it reached its sad climax, which came with a whimper instead of a bang, the dozen or so remaining performers had already started to go their separate ways. Their final show, to celebrate the harvest, merely put a full stop at the end of the paragraph of their careers. Enrique and Maria went solo for a while, he with his magic and her with her ink, but there was little call for a tattooed woman without an ensemble cast of freaks to support her, and there was no ordinary work available for a woman who looked like an artist's canvas. To make matters worse, now that Enrique was of age, the tent outside his mother's caravan was no longer enough. He longed to sleep in a room of his own. More and more often Enrique found himself acting as the breadwinner, and, as the breadwinner, he also maintained control over the purse strings. He gave his mother what she needed to feed them both and to grease the wheels of the carriage as they rode from town to town. He kept the rest for himself, investing in increasingly elaborate clothing and machinery. By his 20th birthday, he had developed his act further, creating a unique look and feel that was inspired by the aesthetics of the late Victorians. He was a relatively short man, so he made up for it with special boots with trick soles that helped to give him another inch or two. He also took to wearing a leather top hat, which was fitted with fake jewels, and which looked ridiculous in the butcher's or at the public house. On stage, however, it gave him a je ne sais quoi that translated into something of an edge over the competition. Enrique coupled the hat with a bizarre outfit that blended fine tailoring with a strange and unusual clockwork. He'd had it custom-made, exhausting no shortage of time and money to track down a tailor and a watchmaker who could get the job done to his specifications. The result was a sheer monstrosity of a suit that mixed copper and iron with silk and cotton. It ticked as he walked, with gears being charged with the kinetic energy of his movement, and steam spouted out of the back of it whenever he clenched his gloved right fist. His other arm was uncovered, exposing his muscles and a swirling tribal tattoo that covered them. There was a stigma against tattoos, and most people associated them with sailors, grog, and drunkenness, but they were the closest thing he had to a family heirloom. His mother had helped him to find an artist, and he'd created the design himself, based on numerology, astrology, and the golden ratio. The suit was heavy and cumbersome, impractical for most purposes, and the polar opposite of casual wear. But it had its uses. He wore it to performances to dazzle the crowds, and to make sure that no matter where he went, everyone knew who he was. He grew a goatee to go with his swarthy looks and Hispanic hair, and he took to wearing a monocle made from a piece of fallen meteorite and a looping chain that attached it to his breast pocket. His new costume needed a new persona to go with it, and so Enrique Lemuerte found himself in search of a name. He'd thought about sticking with Spanish, but the English had fostered a deep mistrust for foreigners, and he was worried that his name could prejudice them against him. And besides, he owed nothing to the Spanish and everything to his parents. He himself was English, or at least as far as he could tell. His accent certainly was, though it had integrated a couple of regional dialects, as well as a whole heap of slang. And so he thought back to the long-gone fortune-teller Gypsy Pink and her durian fruit. From then on, he was no longer Enrique Lemuerte, except to his mother. To the rest of the world, he was Durian Pink. In 1929, Enrique Lemuerte turned 23. He also buried his mother. She had been taken too soon by what the doctors had called a wasting disease. Secretly, he suspected that the loss of his father had been eating away at her. She had certainly lost a lot of weight since the end of the war, and by the time that she took to her deathbed, she had been nothing more than inked skin and bone, like an old piece of parchment that was at risk of immolation if exposed to the light of the sun. Her funeral had been well attended, and Enrique had felt a swell in his heart when Gypsy Pink had approached him after the service and told him that he'd turned into a handsome young man, just as she'd known he always would. He had grown too tall for her to kiss on the top of his head, but he knelt down before her so that she could do it anyway. But after the wake was over, and he had said his final goodbyes, there was nowhere for him to go but back to the wagon. Suddenly, without his mother inside, it seemed a lot bigger. There was nothing to tie him to England, or at least nothing more than the mere fact that it was the country he had been born in. That might have been enough for some, but Enrique Lemuerte had never been a patriot. He thought about spending some time in France, but the idea put him in mind of his father and his final resting place beneath the soil. Germany was out of the question for the same reason, and Italy held no appeal because he couldn't speak the language. And so, as the Roaring Twenties came to a crescendo and the 1930s dawned onto an apathetic world, Enrique Lemuerte found himself selling his parents' wagon, along with most of their worldly possessions. He put the remainder into storage, along with his machines and whichever of his own belongings wouldn't fit into his small leather travelling case. Then he booked himself passage to the Spanish mainland on a steamer, setting sail from Southampton. Time ticked on. Enrique settled into the Spanish way of life like a natural. The food reminded him of his mother's cooking, and he could speak the language with only the barest trace of an accent. The living was good, especially during the summer months, and he was able to find work in the nightclubs and the emerging tourist resorts on the seafronts. But a shadow loomed over the horizon, and it took the form of the swastika. Across Europe, fascism and communism were rearing their heads, and the two words were bandied about in the pubs and the music halls as though they had the power to summon the devil himself. Lemuerte wasn't interested in politics, except for when they directly affected him, but he still listened to the conversations with growing concern. Then the Civil War broke out. The labourers in the cafeterias called it a class struggle, a war of religion, a clash between dictatorship and democracy, and a conflict between revolution and counter-revolution. Lemuerte called it good for business. It started with a coup, which succeeded in some cities and failed in others. That left the country divided and self-destructive, with nationalists and Republicans both vying for control. Lemuerte took neither side, though he watched with worried interest as the fascists in Italy and Germany provided support to the nationalists. The Republicans, meanwhile, were bolstering their numbers with volunteers from across the globe, mostly from countries that opposed the fascists on paper, but who wanted to keep their hands clean of conflict. And so Enrique Lemuerte, or Dorian Pink, depending upon who was asking, found himself working as a touring magician, entertaining the troops as he trekked from camp to camp and outpost to outpost. It didn't matter which side the soldiers were fighting for. There was a moral code of conduct, a guarantee of safe passage for the entertainers, the postmen, and the prostitutes. Times were tough for everyone, but Enrique felt the pinch less than most. The soldiers were bored, keen to spend what little money they earned on whatever cheap thrill they could exchange a coin for. La Muerte was more than happy to take their money. The Civil War raged on. Enrique slipped into a routine of sorts, and all the while he kept learning and experimenting. He was honing his craft, perfecting a magic so powerful that, like a sufficiently advanced technology, it was indistinguishable from the real thing. Among the troops, he started to develop a reputation as a pseudo-saviour. There, on the front line, the men were happy to take any hope they could get, even if that hope was based on a false prophet and a couple of parlour tricks. La Muerte had a knack for sensing death, and would often hand out cryptic clues to the servicemen, who would either follow his suggestions and live, or ignore them and die. To Enrique La Muerte, it was all the same. He only gave out tips to the people who paid him well. He got used to turning a blind eye to the death and destruction. It was just a part of life, like the loneliness that consumed him and sometimes drove him to the brothels, though he tried to limit himself to 2 visits per year to reduce his chances of catching something. With so many soldiers around and so much poverty, disease was rife, especially that of the venereal kind. When the Civil War ended in 1939, he was 33 years old, the same age that Jesus had been when he died on the cross. He was older than his father had been when the Great War had broken out a quarter of a century earlier, but not by much. He was also ready for his next challenge. The music halls of London were waiting for him.
Okay, so that was the latest part of Amorphophallus Titanium by myself, Dane Cobain, narrated by Susie Q. DeMarco. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound, and it's time for a little bit of music. So this is Betty Accorsi, featuring Andrea Martinelli. I think I said his name right. It's from Vergault. His solo project's called Vergault, and we've played some of his tunes before. And this is Betty's cover of My Baby Just Cares For Me by Nina Simone.
My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. My baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for high-tone places. Lit sailor is not his style, and even the nocturnal smile is something he can see. My baby don't care, oh no, sailor is not his side, and even Lana Turner's smile is something he can see, is something he can see. I wonder what's wrong with baby. My baby just cares for, my baby just cares for, my baby just cares for me.
In the future, you'll be able to watch TV on your microwave, 3D print yourself a personal butler,
You rang, Mom?
and get fit by just looking at a treadmill. OK, maybe not that. But wherever the technology does go, radio will go there too. Because Radio Player is working with the world's leading car and tech companies to keep radio out in front. Radio Player. In the car, in the home, in the future. Find out more at radioplayer.org.
Someone on your street, at your supermarket or in your park is highly likely to have COVID-19. This is a national health emergency. Around 1 in 3 people have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. So it's critical we stay home. Don't meet anyone outside your household or support bubble except for exercise. Only go out if it's essential. Stop the spread. Stick to the rules. If you bend the rules, people will die. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Okay, that was My Baby Just Cares For Me by Betty Accorsi doing a Nina Simone cover. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and we're going to head over to this week's guest, who is Carl Snook, who is an author and wrestler, artist, musician. So over to Carl.
The first question, which I ask everybody, is what was the last book that you read and what did you think of it?
The last book I read was was actually a marriage book.
Right.
My brother-in-law gave it to me. It was interesting. It's not kind of the thing I would choose to read. I'm more of a sort of biography fantasy guy, definitely. But yeah, it was sort of a change of pace, I suppose.
And so in terms of like, so you mentioned biography and fantasy, and we'll go to fantasy in a second. What kind of biographies do you tend to read?
Mostly, the first one I read was Mankind, Mick Foley's book.
Yeah.
I just the way he was describing and the way he told his stories, you were captivated in the first couple of pages. Like, he's just so good at it. And once I read his, I kind of went looking for other wrestlers' biographies because I thought, well, if that one's good, I'll see what else people have. Then I started reading a lot of things like Duncan Bannatyne, the Dragon. I read his, sort of pushed through my entrepreneurial spirit, I suppose. Just reading about people's lives, it's just so interesting to read their experiences. And then the difference, I suppose, is when you read something that someone has written themselves and when they've got someone else to write it for them, there is a difference there. It's much more personal with the ones that they've written on their own. Like Mick's, Mick did all of his. Much more personal, much more. You get more drawn into them, I think.
Right. I can agree. And even like, I mean, even in the ghostwritten ones, they tend to be done with like, people will sit down with whoever it is and they'll, base it on conversations and stuff. But you still don't get that same vibe as when somebody writes it themselves. And it's funny because you mentioned Mick Foley, and because I follow him on social media as well. And I've always kind of been impressed with his social media. Like, you can tell that it's him running it and not somebody running it for him, Yeah,
you can. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Mick's, he's pretty much, I mean, if there's ever someone to sort of model yourself on story wise and how he deals and how he carries himself as well. I mean, the guy's a millionaire, but he wears trackies, he's in plaid shirts, like, he's not changed from the day he jumped off that garage roof to now. He's still the same guy, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, so moving on to fantasy then, and obviously that's sort of the genre that you write in yourself. Could you tell us about Akio and the Dream World? And did I pronounce Akio right?
I mean, and people can pronounce it however they think it sounds, really, because that's kind of the idea of the book.
Yep.
I based it off the Hayao Miyazaki stuff. Was where I sort of first got the kind of I mean, when I saw Howl's Moving Castle, Wow. Then I watched My Neighbor Totoro, Ponyo, Spirited Away, you name them. He is, the way that they do the adverts, the master storyteller. He is. It's so brilliant, his stuff. So that's where I got the kind of idea from. The book itself is much more personal thing. I mean, I've got millions of stories in drawers and in lofts, and I've never done anything with them. I had all these worlds in my head. But this particular one, I actually started writing when I was looking after my mum. She was diagnosed with cancer, and unfortunately, we had a recurrence. And I actually looked after her for the last 10 months of her life. Have you ever seen Finding Neverland?
No, I don't. I haven't seen it, but I know of it.
Well, I think what I was trying to do for sort of self-care, self-therapy, was I was trying to escape to a place where I could go to, where I wasn't in reality anymore. Like I had the job, I had to look after mum, and I did my very best. But I needed somewhere to escape to, so I plucked out one of these worlds from my head and started putting it down on paper. And each night or each time I did some new parts, I'd take it upstairs and mum would read it. And very unfortunately, she died before I finished. So I thought to myself, if I'm ever going to finish anything in my life, it has to be this. I mean, on the back, I've dedicated it to her. On the back, it's to my mother, may you now rest safe in my dreams. Because again, sort of, I don't know different people's spiritualities or what they believe. Everyone's going to have different beliefs. I don't particularly know what mine is, but it's kind of like I created a world that she could go to as well.
Yeah.
Like she didn't pass on; she just went to the dream world. So it means, I mean, it holds a very, very special place in my heart. This one particular, because of all of that. It's all connected to that. And some people that have read it have said that you can also. I poured my pain, I poured my anguish, I poured my soul into the book. And some people said, you can identify with certain things from the book. And there was one person, in fact, you know him, in fact, France Elol.
Yeah, he's been a guest on this show.
Oh, is he? Oh, excellent. Yeah, I mean, he bought a few copies, and I've been told by some people that you can almost tell to the page when it happened.
Yeah,
because the style kind of changed, and you could almost tell that I was trying to give something to people that they could say, actually, I feel the same way.
Yeah, for sure. And so obviously your mum was quite involved in it, especially I suppose the earlier parts. Were you able to incorporate kind of any of her ideas or any of her feedback into the story?
Not so much her ideas and stuff. She was always, I mean, I've always been from a very young age, people always said I had a very active imagination. Yeah. And I think mum liked that. I've never really had my head on earth, as it were. I've always been up in the clouds, or I mean, a lot of the things that I do, it's none of them are normal, are they?
Define normal, but yeah.
Well, yeah, define normal. And I think she liked the fact that I was finally properly putting all this stuff in my head down on paper. Yeah. Because I'm sure you've written a number of books. I'm sure you sort of get a similar thing when sometimes when you've got all these worlds in your head, it's irritating.
Yeah.
There's so many different things up there all flying about the place that when you actually start getting it out, it's almost a relief. Because it's still there, it's still in your head, but when you're getting it out, you are sharing it, you are releasing it from its binds, as it were. And I think she just kind of liked the fact that I was doing that.
That's awesome, though. Cool. And obviously, there's the idea of the dream world, and I think I read a quote from you that there's a dream world out there for everyone. They just have to hold on to it and find it. Can you share some sort of tips on how we can find that dream world?
I mean, the mind can be a very weird and wonderful place. Well, as we know, it can be, and also quite a bad place. From the last year, a lot of people have sort of been reaching out, which is great as well to see people reaching out. But I think the best thing is your dream world is whatever you make it. I would say, if you've got an imagination, don't try and quash it, because you may sound like some kind of weirdo, but that's good. That's where you get these ideas from. That's where, give something a try. I mean, all the things I've done, the wrestling, the music, the book, the art, anything I've tried, it's all come from this weird and wonderful world that I call my brain. Just let it free. It's don't quash something.
Yeah, we kind of need to like normalize the embracing our weirdness, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think as well, it's one of those things. I mean, you say ever since you were a kid, you've had this active imagination, and I think most people, when they're kids, have quite an active imagination. And it's kind of a case of whether you let that die as you get older, or whether you kind of embrace that inner child and into your adulthood.
Well, yeah. I mean, some people use. I mean, I personally, I think I did it from a lieu of wanting to escape. As a young child going through, parents' divorce when it wasn't the norm, shall we say. I generated an imagination to find things to escape to.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, it sounds quite sad, but in a way, it was used for a purpose. That escapism became a very vivid imagination of worlds created in my head. And again, yeah, use it. Use it, definitely.
Well, it's almost like a tool as well for our own, well-being and our own mental health. And I think it's quite interesting, going back to right that very first question. The sort of the kind of stuff that you read is quite like, it's either very much like autobiographical about like the world we live in, very anchored in the world, or it's kind of the complete opposite when you're kind of escaping. And there's room for both,
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I've always said that I love Tolkien. I think the fact that the guy created not just some stories, he created an entire world. The man was a genius, and that's. I mean, Lord of the Rings. I own swords, and I've got a One Ring replica, and I just really love the fact that some people will create a surface world and they'll create a story out of it. But he did everything. There's languages, there's dictionaries, there's further stories, the Silmarillion, Children of the Hurin. It's such a vast world. There's even a book about the First Age. That he had so much material that, again, I don't know if he was trying to escape. And I've always loved the fact that the first thing he wrote on an exam paper was, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit.
Yeah,
just that random idea. It must have just popped in, and he wrote it down,
and it all built from there.
Yeah,
yeah, amazing, cool. Okay, so in terms of Akio, you started writing that in 2012. So that's already sort of 10 years of writing. How long would you say that you've been writing for?
I started probably. Let's try and work it out. I was probably around sort of 7-8 years old. I've got a very old Pokemon binder somewhere with the very first thing I wrote in it, very much based on, if you know the game, the Heroes of Might and Magic.
Yes, yeah, I know that game. Yeah.
So I based the very first thing I did on that, because the first one I played was Heroes 3.
Yeah.
I wasted a lot of hours on that game. But again, it was a brilliant story. I kind of bought into the fantasy, and I wanted to try and do something that replicated that.
Yeah.
And then it sort of went from there, really.
Cool. I'm actually going to quickly jot that down, because recently because I'm getting older and all this stuff, and I happen to be an adult, I don't have as much time to play games. So I've been spending a lot of time watching YouTubers play games, because I can have that on in the background. So I'm currently about halfway through watching somebody play the first Witcher game, because I never played them.
Oh, right.
And I recently finished reading the books, but I'm going to dig out some people playing Heroes of Might and Magic as well. Cool.
Excellent.
Okay, and so what was the road to publication like? Did you have a publisher? Did you self-publish? And who did you work with along the way for things like cover design and whatnot?
So firstly, I had this weird kind of image of grandeur in my head, where I thought, if I go to the States, someone might luckily see it, and that's where all the movies are made and stuff. I mean, I think I was again head in the clouds, I think, but I started with a company called iUniverse. They were quite good. I mean, they did it was an old brown cover, which at the time I didn't actually like very much, but because I wanted it out so much, I didn't complain. I was just like, yep, cool, did the sign off. And what was difficult though is that communication between me and the States was, whenever they wanted to talk to me, it was 8-9 o'clock in the evening, and the time difference was just too. And then it got to the point where I decided that I didn't like the cover at all. So all the kind of difficulties, and I didn't like the cover. I thought, right, I'm gonna move it. So I got into contact with a company called New Generation. Spoke to a very nice man on the phone. But one of the first things I said to him was, please let me design the cover myself. It was the first thing, because I knew that it was, like I said, I didn't complain about the brown cover, but it was always something that was hanging over my head. I said to him, please let me do it. And they said, yeah, that's fine. Send it over when it's ready. They did all the proof. I did all the sign off again. So it was re-released in 2015 with the new blue cover. There is one copy that exists, which my sister has actually, with a completely different cover that I didn't do the sign off on. I just, I got it sent to me by New Generation, because I said, look, can you send me a copy so I can actually see what it looks like? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So there's one in existence, one with that cover. And then I did the new blue one.
Cool. And so we kind of covered it a little bit, but what's the reaction been to it from the people who read it?
Again, I think everyone's liked it, who's read it. I think because the people who know me have spoken to me about it, they kind of aren't surprised what came out. I think the only thing that a lot of everyone has been surprised about is that it goes quite deep. Like I said, I think it was probably the time I was writing it, where I just poured everything into it. So it's very kind of, there's lots of emotional bits, there's lots of fast-paced bits, there's lots of slow bits, especially for quite a short book. It's not long at all. And I mean, one person interestingly said to me, "Did you base Akio on yourself?" I said, "I didn't think I had. No. Why?" And they said, "Oh, I think you did in some kind of subconscious way." And I'd never looked at it that way, but maybe he is. I don't know. Maybe he came out, and maybe he is. Maybe there is a bit of me in there.
You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Carl Snook, who is an author, wrestler, and various other things. And it's time for a quick music break. This is She Has a Way by Robert Honor, who's been a previous guest on the show.
She has a way. As the sun burns her eyes, she has a way that she straps up her boots, shoelaces tied in a noose, in a leopard pantsuit, just scream her name. She has a way. I gotta say, the way she enters a room is like she's out of the moon, a sudden bringer of doom. I'm not okay. Her skin is perspiring, that makes my desiring hotter than fire, no mistake. She has a way. Oh, she's fixing the game, a tyrannical reign. She's the queen of insane, all the pain, but that she's worth every bandit. She's so heavy-handed, the siren has landed. Not just today, she'll always have her way. So hard to take, the others do well. They're avoiding a spell, a certain window to hell. My heart aches that they'll never know the chemical glow that only she can outgrow. You can't escape her wicked ways. Is it pure lunacy to fall into your arms? It's this that bothers me, an internalized alarm. Please make me happy, but treat me mean, and I won't panic, 'cause you're my queen. She strides with a mission, a strange disposition with no indecision. If you get caught, she shows no forgiveness. She's nothing but business. You don't want to witness the fall. No, not at all. She has a way to ensure you don't stray, returning day after day to the moral decay. She has a way, she's more thunder than lightning, oppressive and frightening, but the rumble's exciting. You get the shakes. She has a way. She has a way. She has a way. She has a way.
That was She Has a Way by Robert Honor. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm joined here in conversation by this week's guest, who is Carl Snook. So over to Carl.
Well, there probably is. I mean, like probably in most of your characters as well, or because that's the other. Because I kind of get that as well, you know. And so sometimes there are characters when I'm like, that character is actually kind of this person that I know, but like sort of toned down or toned up or whatever it is. But you know, you've always got to build from something, I suppose, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, one particular character that is in the book is has been everybody's favourite. It's a little cheeky bird called Tiny. And the reason I did him as a character was because at the time, you know, I felt so lonely. You know, I was taking care of mum. You know, I was sort of massive burden on my shoulders, not really knowing what to do. And you sometimes just wish that there's that person, you know, someone to talk to, just that company, you know, just a little friend. And I thought, what a brilliant thing to do, to create a character like that, where he has this little cheeky bird on his shoulder. You know, he's there, he's a companion, and that kind of thing. Like the characters I built weren't so much based on people, but very much on how I felt at the time.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like a reflection of the time that you wrote it. And okay, cool. So Another thing I want to talk to you about is the wrestling. So can you tell us about EWA and let us know, maybe introduce who the pirate captain is to us?
So, I mean, EWA was a concept where originally I actually came up with the idea in 2007. My uncle at the time was diagnosed with cancer. It had already sort of been subsequently told to us that there wasn't much they could do. You know, the end was unfortunately coming. And I thought, I need to do something. You know, I need to do something to sort of do my bit. You know, I loved my uncle to pieces. I mean, if anything, in terms of creativity, he was the one of the family that sort of made me feel I belonged.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll do a wrestling show. You know, I've watched it years. We'll do a wrestling show. We'll donate to the cancer research. We'll do our bit. He unfortunately died before the first show went on in 2008. But when we did the show, you know, a friend of mine sort of came to me and he said, you know, there's a niche here. You know, we don't have anything like this in Wycombe. He goes, you know, we either got to drive into London, you know, or wait for someone to come to the Swan, or we've got to go to Birmingham or down south to Portsmouth. You know, there was nothing within, you know, a 20 to 30, probably further mile radius. And he said, we should carry on doing this. So we took a year after 2008. We didn't actually do anything until 2009, August 2009. And when we did it, Wycombe responded really, really well. And then, of course, with, you know, with Mum subsequently dying of cancer as well, it was almost like a sign, you know, sort of, you're doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I've always loved wrestling. I mean, again, it was escapism for me when I first found wrestling. WrestleMania 12 was the first live thing I watched. And again, it gives that thing to people where, you know, life can be rubbish sometimes. And on a Saturday night, if you can just give people that escape where they can have a great time, you know, they look at this, you know, wrestlers as, you know, heroes, and they're screaming and everything's great, and people come up to you afterwards and they say, you know, oh, we've had such a great time, when's the next one? You go, this is why we do it. You know, this is why we do it. And we always, every show donates to different charities. Nettlebed always gets something because that's where Mum died. Cancer Research is one of the very, very regulars. We've done Poppy Appeal, we've done British Legion, NSPCC. Every time, you know, a charity gets a donation every time because it's part of the reason why it started, and I think we should keep that going.
Yeah,
it's almost the lifeblood of it.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And sorry, I was going to say, do you want to introduce the pirate captain?
So the captain was an idea that, as we came up with a concept, me and a friend of mine, the same friend who sort of said carry on, we came up with a concept that how awesome would it be if there was a pirate character in the wrestling, because I think Pirates 4 was coming out at the time, or had been announced at least. We came up with this concept for this pirate character, and we offered it to a few people. There was a guy, Ed Gamester, we offered it to, a bunch of the other wrestlers who kind of looked kind of piratey. Weirdly, everyone kind of turned it down. They all had their characters already.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where, you know, I was, you know, an active competitor at the time, and I thought, okay, you know, we've offered it to other people. They don't want it. That's absolutely fine. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he sort of became somewhat of an alter ego because I like pirates. you know, I kind of, you know, I've got the long hair, you know, sort of Jack Sparrow beard sometimes when I shave it nicely anyway. And I kind of looked the part as well, but even the captain developed over time as well. Like, you know, I had got the hat and the trousers and the boots and the frilly shirt and stuff. But he as a character, because he was so well received by the crowd, even he started to develop into, you know, I don't know if you've seen the latest picture of the red coat that I got, a nice red silk coat. I used to come out with a sword as well. Then the insurance changed. We weren't reenactment anymore. We got put back into sport.
Right. Yeah.
So I wasn't able to anymore because the health and safety had changed. So I wasn't able to carry it anymore. But it was, I mean, even for when September, we've got a show booked for September.
Cool.
And I am being the captain on the show. But I've bought myself another new coat. because again, it's that development of, I've not done it in 2 years. I've been away from the ring for quite a while, but it's that even though it's been away for 2 years, he's now developing, and he's more nostalgic feeling for the people who know him and like him.
Yeah. That's really cool. And one question that I wanted to ask is like, you know, what are the similarities between writing and wrestling? Because, you know, both of them are sort of storytelling. Both of them have got heroes and villains. So do you think that being a writer helps with being a wrestler and vice versa?
I would say the writing helps the wrestling more than the wrestling helps the writing, because the idea is that you're presenting a story to the crowd. You know, they have spent their hard-earned money to come to your show, so you've got to give them an experience that is worth that money. It's very interesting, the wrestling world, because it's very, you almost have to see yourself as a crowd member as well as the people that are putting it on. Because you have to go, well, you know, what they're going to like, which parts of the last brilliant match we did was Bullet versus Sammy Smooth, and we thought the crowd will love it. These guys are both originally from Wycombe. They were both champions at the time, so we came up with this concept of the battle of the hometown heroes. Both titles on the line, and it was brilliant. That kind of thing. Crowd bought straight into it. They were cheering both. They then subsequently sort of chose which one they preferred, and then started cheering him more. And then they started booing Sammy. You know, once they'd sort of gone, actually, we choose him.
Yeah.
The dynamic of the audience changed, and it's brilliant seeing that kind of thing, because the crowd themselves, you know, they are part of it.
Yeah.
In the way that they decide who they like, who they don't like, and like it's the stories that you come up with. You have to try and think, you know, what's going to catch their attention, you know, what's going to make them feel excited. You know, you've really got to try and come up with things that you think they're going to like. So you kind of look at it as, I mean, writer, I don't know if is the sort of right way to describe it, because you kind of say to the guys, this is what we need from the match, but they kind of take it, you know, you sort of say, you know, but have fun with it, you know, go out there and do what you want.
It's kind of like a hybrid between sort of storytelling and improv, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost like if you were to look at a story as ingredients in a cake, I suppose you've given them what you want the cake to look like and taste like, but they're the ones that actually do all the filling. Yeah,
that's a great metaphor. I love that. Cool. Okay, and just a couple more questions to end on. So the first one, I guess. So you mentioned you got this show in September. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, when it is and where it is?
Yeah, so it's September the 18th. We are coming back to the Judo Centre in Cressex to start with. It's please do watch the trailer, because I think it's great. We're doing a Star Wars theme.
Oh, amazing.
So what I've done is I built a trailer, movie trailer, that is very, very close to the Star Wars trailers. I mean, it's got 20th Century Wrestling logo instead of 20th Century Fox. I changed the Lucasfilm into EWA film. It's got the rolling credits. It's got everything, because the movie themes was something, again, that we thought, me and the same friend came up with the idea that movie themes is something that people will like it because they identify with it. They know the movie, so they like it straight away. It's exciting. It also makes my job easier, because I don't have to design a theme. It's already there for me.
That's cool. I'm just thinking, in that case, if we do this show next Tuesday instead of the Tuesday after, it's also May the 4th. So that's really nice timing, because it's Star Wars Day.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of your writing, are you still writing? Are you working on anything new?
So there's actually, I mean, the Akio book it was always part of a planned trilogy. I'm only about 25, 30 pages into the second one, which I started writing back in 2017. But no, I haven't sort of carried on with that one. I did subsequently move on to two other ideas. One is called The Secret of the Nevermoor. And the idea behind that book is, if you were to imagine every idea or every decision or every choice that wasn't made, where does it go? If there was a world where all these things went to, that's the Nevermoor.
I like that. It's like the parallel universes theory, where every decision that's made, it makes those parallel universes, kind of like that.
Well, yeah, and the sort of play on words is that the reason why it's the secret of the Nevermoor is because we don't know what happens to these other choices.
Yeah,
it is a secret because we don't know.
Yeah, and actually, like, it's one of those things you could go mad, like, thinking about it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, certainly.
I mean, I guess you have this yourself. Like, there are so many points in your life where just a tiny little thing has like completely changed everything. Like, even for you, for example, if you'd never put on that first wrestling show, you'd probably be a totally different person, you know?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's been a sort of escape for me in hard times. Like, I haven't competed for the last 2 years, but it was always a place where, you know, when you become, because I always refer to the captain as a separate person, because I think he is. You become him when you need him, and you become him when, in some kind of way, when the crowd wants him.
Yeah,
you know, you can be that other person, and you can sort of escape reality for a while.
Cool. Okay, and just one final question, which is, we've kind of covered what's next. So, where can people find out more, and also where can people get a copy of your book?
So Akio is on Amazon. It's on the Waterstones online store as well. Because I didn't want to sort of I've got a bunch of authors freebies under my bed, but I thought it would be better to do it on a print to order basis, because then that way it helps me out, it helps shops out. You know, it just makes it easier for everybody that it only gets printed if they want it. So yeah, they're the sort of main two places. I did a book signing for W.H. Smith, and I think they've picked it up.
Cool. And what about online? I think there's a Facebook page. Is that right?
There is a Facebook page. Yes. I believe. I don't know exactly how Facebook works, but I believe it is just Akio in the Dream World after the Facebook slash.
Thank you very much to Carl Snook for joining me. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. It's time for a little bit more music, and this is Occasionally David with Clapton's Shirt.
A silly man standing in the Jew. Welcome to my company, a penny for you too. I stuck a lolly up my nose and almost pierced the brain. Come back Paddy Carstairs and come back Bronco Lane. Look at Eric Clapton's shirt. Bencher, I think it is Bencher, man. Here I am, a silly man, standing in the glue. Welcome to my company, a penny for you too. I stuck a lolly up my nose and almost pierced the brain. Come back, Paddy Carstairs, come back, Bronco Lee. Shirt, and here it comes again. Oh look, and here comes Fred Perry plus Tap Hunter, and that makes 3. Oh blah blah.
Someone on your street, at your supermarket, or in your park is highly likely to have COVID-19. This is a national health emergency. Around 1 in 3 people have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. So it's critical we stay home. Don't meet anyone outside your household or support bubble except for exercise. Only go out if it's essential. Stop the spread. Stick to the rules. If you bend the rules, people will die. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Love WhatsApp? Love Wycombe Sound? Use WhatsApp to message us. Just send your message to 01494 449900. Go on, give it a try.
That was Clapton's Shirt by Occasionally David. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. I am your host, Dane Cobain, and we're going to head over to the Ilk Shed to be joined by Twangling Jack Ford with this week's album.
Van Morrison Moondance. I found this in a charity shop, And I was only really looking for one song. It's the song Glad Tidings, which I'd heard on The Sopranos, and I really wanted a copy of that. So anything else above that from a charity shop I'd paid £1 for it is a bonus. And there's a lot of bonus because you've got the title song, you've got And It Stoned Me, you've got Crazy Love. And he had dropped the folk jazz thing, and the direction he was going in would be what he did for the rest of his career, which is basically a mixture between Celtic music and soul music. This is mostly soul music, but it does have the song Into the Mystic, which was a bit of an indication of the other way that he would be going. So this is Moondance by the Belfast cowboy himself, Van Morrison.
Thank you very much to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. My name is Dane Cobain. You've been listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. As always, you can email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. I'd love to hear from musicians, poets, artists, performers, anybody who's got some arts news they would like to share with the listeners, and I'll do my best to give you a shout out. We're going to leave you with a tune by Steph Willis, and Steph is performing, well, she's got a gig coming up at Wycombe Arts Centre, which I help with the marketing side of things and also behind the bar, and she's playing on a Friday, June the 11th at the Flint Cottage. And so this is Steph Willis with All In. I will see you next week.
Lately, I've been thinking about you daily. Caught up in the heat of the night that you caught my eye. They called time and I said goodbye. Left us right there up in the distance, surrounded by the walls that I made just to keep me safe. But you walked right through my barricades. Call me up in the middle of the night, 'cause you can't wait till the morning light. You told me everything would be alright. You told me not to worry, no, not to worry. Be my peace, come be my savior, come be my world, my world. Oceans part won't stop us. Days turn to night and we're helpless. Go in the shadow. Promised that I would never cross that line, but I'm so far into you. Teach me how to really let you see me. I've been hurt, but I know that I'm not alone, 'cause you lit the light in my heart of stone. Call me up in the middle of the night, 'cause I can't wait till the morning light. You told me everything would be alright. You told me not to worry, no, not to worry. Be my peace, come be my savior, come be my world, my world. Oceans apart won't stop us. Days turn to night and we're helpless.
This is Wycombe Sound.